Hi, I'm Adam. I'm a software engineer who worked a lot of different places in a relatively short period of time. Sometimes I have a beard. I only have 7 minutes, so here we go. John Holland's theory of career choice tells us that people interact with their workplace in one of six ways: realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, or conventional. Sometimes these categories can correspond with specific types of jobs or career paths, but one resource I found mapped all of these types back to technology or computing jobs. Personally, I don't find these categories to be a perfect one to one match with a specific job or environment, but I will highlight some aspects of workplace culture that I experienced, which will illustrate differences in working environments at various companies, even with the same job function. So, I worked for 7 companies in 1 year. Most of these were short term contracts, some of them were part time and overlapped. However, the bookend jobs are a role that I was in for about 2 years in my current role. A few more details about these jobs for context. Every job used Go as a primary development language. My experience was US centric, and most teams had substantial overlap with my home time zone. 2 jobs were in office, and the rest were remote. These companies ranged in size from extremely small to extremely large, included a government role, some startups, as well as publicly traded companies. My titles ranged from junior to staff, and this was not a progression. Uh, Generally, I got less seniority at larger companies and more seniority at smaller companies, but that was not strictly accurate either. Uh, and compensation was mostly unrelated to my title and fluctuated over time. Short term contract rates could be much higher than permanent roles, so I started low and roughly quadrupled my overall compensation during that year. Uh, I'll spend the rest of the time trying to describe some of the key things that stood out about each work environment in these very different Go shops. So I started the year in the same role that I'd been in for about 2 years, where my main responsibility was administering WordPress websites. However, I'd gotten obsessed with Docker and Kubernetes and started incorporating Go into my work. This culminated in writing a microservice in Go to handle shibboleth authentication for other applications. For those who may not be aware, shibboleth is a form of SAML that's popular in higher education. And for those who are unfamiliar with SAML, uh, good. It's an XML-based authentication language, and it's not important. Uh, this was a conventional work environment. They valued predictability and dependability. So for the most part, they did not really appreciate it when I'd started talking about incorporating new technologies and going cloud native. Ultimately, I knew that I really, really wanted to play with newer technologies. So I left a safe and stable job to add a little bit more danger to my life. Uh, the next place I landed was my first role as a contractor. It was an enterprising, mid sized startup with somewhere on the order of 100 engineers. There, I found a system of rigorously defined bugs with a clear set of expectations for every commit. Code would not be committed until it met the strict standards of the organization. To their credit, it was probably the best organized code base I've worked on to date. However, this came at a cost to my sanity. This was where I learned about conventional commits and the nitpick or nit type. I saw a lot of them at that company because the environment around me strongly encouraged debate and discussion, even on minor points. For example, I had a PR that was blocked on the difference between an error being logged as an object does not exist or was not found, a distinction mostly without difference. Uh, this ultimately was not a great fit for me, so I finished my project and moved along. Next, I joined a tiny incubator within a larger company. I was actually the first engineering hire for this new team. They wanted a substantial product of the company rewritten in Go. The business requirements were clear, and there was little interaction with the production or legacy staff, at least early on. This was a realistic environment where the goal was pretty much just to build things. Faster was better. This job was by far the most code I wrote on a daily basis. I would just tap away at my keyboard for most of the day and have several new features implemented each week, and that was only working 20 hours a week. As the team scaled up, the pace of coding slowed, and I transitioned out when the team reached about 8 people. Meanwhile, I started a second part time job. This was an artistic environment. Okay, it wasn't an artistic environment. I don't actually know what it was. And so I was supposed to start working on moving some Python services into Go, but my first week, my supervisor quit and didn't tell me. And so once they figured out that I was still employed, They canceled my contract the next week. So job security can be one potential disadvantage to being a contractor. Next, I worked for a company that was developing open source infrastructure as a service software. I received extremely little guidance there for a couple reasons. One was company culture, and then the other was that I only had a couple hours of overlap each day with the time zone for most of their staff. This environment definitely favored a lot of critical thinking and independent problem solving. The turnaround time, if I had questions, was usually a full day or up to 3 days over a weekend. I provided daily status updates in a Slack channel and sometimes received comments, but ultimately, I was just expected to figure it out. The next company I joined was a small fintech startup that was growing rapidly and really trying to keep engineers happy. During the time I was there, they added a work from home allowance, unlimited PTO, gym reimbursements. As one senior leader in the company told me, there are different places where a company's leadership can focus their attention. They wanted to focus their attention on their employees and making it a great place to work before all else. This also manifested itself in lots of opportunities for social wellness breaks and guided meditation. It was a much more social environment than anywhere else I worked. Finally, the last of my 7 jobs is where I am now. It's a big tech firm that's difficult to categorize in terms of the environment, and I kind of like it that way. Some days I crank out code, some days I delve deep into design choices, sometimes I fix broken things. So I encourage you to think about your role and how to optimize your career. Oh, I have more time than I thought. So, yeah, what type of environment helps you feel good about how you spend your time each day? And how can you optimize your career to make sure you don't have to have 7 jobs in one year? Thank you.